So I'll keep it brief. So I started out in what we used to call bricks and clicks. So brick and mortar retailers that were going into the e-com space. So I was with a company called EB Games. So any of you that are gamers out there, if you remember Electronics Boutique, GameStop, EB Games, that's where my career started. And it was an interesting time because the internet was coming along, digital distribution was on the horizon, and everyone knew that brick and mortar retailing in the video game industry would eventually disappear. So there was a merger. GameStop came along, they moved operations, and I decided to switch roles. I went over into automotive aftermarket with a company called Quadratech, and I spent some time there. They were a catalog retailer, and they were making the move into e-com. So much like the bricks and clicks, these guys are catalog retailers making their way over into the e-com business. And then finally, about a year and a half ago, I moved over to Burpee and consumer packaged goods. This is a company that's 150 years old and has an absolute stringent policy for quality in everything that they do. So quite frankly, it was my first trip into CPG. It was a little bit intimidating, but fortunately we're able to do some pretty cool stuff there, and our e-com presence is really coming along. So the thing I wanted to talk about today is about 3 weeks ago, a former colleague contacted me, and he was telling me about how he was having issues with his development agency. This guy's a marketer, and he's giving me the long story that I'm sure many of you have heard, which is our dev agency doesn't respond, or our dev agency doesn't understand what it is that we're trying to accomplish, or our dev agency, they didn't do exactly what we wanted them to do. The outcome wasn't what we expected. So I met with him, and we got into a conversation, and what I realized is that it wasn't the dev agency, it was the communication between him and the dev agency. I was talking to Lisa just a moment ago, and we were talking about the differences between marketers and developers. And a lot of times there's a pretty big gap there. So what I want to do and what I want to help all of you with is at the beginning of the show here, David Tufts said that a good speaker will give his audience something to go home with. So what I'm hoping you'll go home with is just a little insight about how marketers can communicate better with developers. So the first thing that we want to do, all of us, of course, is create an amazing user experience. And in order to do that, your marketing team, your UX guys, you have to work with the developers, and you have to make sure that you're on the same page and that you have the same vision. But in reality, some of us use overseas teams, and the communication goes like this. You send an email, and you got some questions about the requirements, and it takes 24 hours, and then you get an email back with an answer that then causes some more questions, and another 24 hours goes by, and then your project, you're into weeks of back and forth communication, and you feel like it's going nowhere. And then so you get into a Teams meeting, or you have a phone call, and you talk through the requirements. The developer's up and running, and they come back to you a few weeks later with the first draft of this, and it's nothing what you expected. And the fact of the matter is, it's not that the developer necessarily didn't know what they were doing. It's that the communication of what was expected and what would be accepted was not effectively communicated. So a lot of times there's really two types of interactions that marketers and product owners have with development teams. The first one is bugs. There's a bug in my software. one of the actual support tickets that I received in my career had the title, "Orders Don't Work." And I'm sure a number of you got the same message from one of your stakeholders. Orders don't work, right? So then what do you do? Well, okay, let me go to the website. I key this in. Yeah. Oh, wait, orders do work. What are they talking about? Now there's a phone call, there's a conversation, there's a discovery process that happens, right? And that all takes time and effort. Another one that I'll give you an example is a feature request. We want an email subscription on our homepage. Okay, that's, who wouldn't want that, right? Do we want a modal dialogue? Do we want it in the footer? Do we want it, like how do we want it? Do you want it to pop up after they scroll the page? 5 seconds, then we pop it, right? There's a lot of details there that are missing. And so what ends up happening, you're working with an overseas team, that's a long time to get back and forth and to figure out all those details. We're in the age now of AI, and I'm sure many of you have experimented with it. And when you're effectively using AI, you're creating a very long prompt. 500 words, 800 words, 1,000 words, and you're being really descriptive to AI, right? You're telling Claude.ai, like, okay, so I want to create this module, and it needs to do X, it needs to do Y. When somebody clicks on this, I want that to happen. And then when we're working with developers, we say something like, orders don't work. So AI gets a really long description, but then your developer, orders don't work. So it's funny, Gretchen mentioned to me, she's like, you're not going to be talking about AI, right? Because everyone else is talking about AI. I had to tie it back into AI somehow, right? I mean, these all have to be tied back to AI somehow. So my advice then is when you're creating a bug report, take the time, think about what steps do my developer need to take in order to repeat this problem? And when they do fix it, what is it that I expect to happen? Like, what was the outcome that I expected that didn't happen? And then I would say also, when you're creating feature requests, when you're trying to communicate, I want this new feature in my website, I like to start out with explaining why. And so, and that sounds like it's somewhat of a waste of time. It's like, okay, well, I want this email sign up on my homepage. Well, why do you want that there? Like, what's the end goal? What are you trying to get to? Are you trying to drive email subscriptions? Are you trying to get people to use this promotion that maybe they didn't know about? Like, explain the why. What's the end result? Because when your development team starts out by reading the why, it's going to lead to a conversation, and it's going to lead to ideation that maybe there's some things that you hadn't thought about, and maybe there's a better and more effective way of doing it. So the first point I would give is start out by explaining why you want this feature. The second point that I would say is write it down. So, if you're in a Teams meeting, use some of the AI technologies to take a transcript so that you have an exact recollection of what was said and what's expected. Take notes, write requirements, because in the end, when you get that product back and you see the way it works, and you go back and you look at the conversation, you'll say, yeah, you know what, this matched up, or you know what, this point wasn't made. And quite frankly, as you're vetting your development agency, are they doing a good job? Are they not doing a good job? Really, the basis for that is how accurately they're following the instructions. They're following what was written down. And then finally, I'd say be clear with what you'll accept. So, write up acceptance criteria. So we want this on our homepage. We want this email sign up on our homepage. Here's why we want it. Here's my written explanation of what we expect. And here's the outcomes that I'll accept. If you've done all of these things, I will accept that as being a good product. So to that end, explain why, write it down, be clear about acceptance criteria. That's what I leave with you today. Thank you, everyone.